Inspirasyon sa atin lahat. Pagkat alam kong lahat nito ay nasa kamay ng ating Ama na nasa langit.
Our next question is from naman po ngayon ay ang Chairman and CEO of the Manila Times, Mr. Dante Clink Ang II. Mr. Ang, go ahead.
Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Professor Carlos started us off with a foreign policy question, and I'd like to ask something similar where it converges with gut issues. The public discourse on the West Philippine Sea often glosses over the interests of the smallest stakeholders. It was refreshing to hear several candidates for president mention the need to allow Filipinos to fish in the disputed areas, but we have not heard specifics. The concern for our fisherfolk seems to be growing on a larger audience, particularly the young voters, as evidenced by the release just days ago of a music video featuring the rock band Sponge Cola and singer Karil. If elected president, how will you look after the interests of small fishermen who are occasionally harassed by foreign vessels and often crowded out in the controversial area by fishing boats from countries with competing territorial claims like Vietnam, Taiwan, and of course, China?
Senator Marcos?
Marami talaga tayong issue, hindi lamang sa conflicting claims sa gitna ng Pilipinas at saka China. Kaya't ngayon lang ang nakita kong national election na naging issue ang West Philippine Sea or ang foreign policy. At sa palagay ko, sa dami ng ating kailangan ayusin, sa ating pagsasama, sa pagkaalyansa natin sa China, ay unahin natin ito. Ito ang pinakauna na dapat natin simulaan, na makabalik ang mga mangingisda doon sa kanilang palaisdaan na matagal na ginagamit, na daan-daang taon na. Siguro naman, may papaliwanag natin sa China na ang mga bangka ay hindi naman military threat yan sa kanila. Bakit sila maglalagay ng warship doon? Ngunit kailangan natin mag-responde. Kung maulit yung nangyari noon, tayo magpadala naman tayo ng Navy o kahit na Coast Guard para merong military presence, meron tayong presence of the state na nandoon, na nasa lugar na yun. Pangalawa, puntahan natin ang ASEAN at magpatulong tayo sa ASEAN. Dahil ang ASEAN ay meron din binubuo na code of conduct para sa ASEAN at saka sa China, at sana maipasa na yan. Punta pati tayo sa UN. At magpadala tayo ng delegation sa Beijing para kausapin ang Presidente Xi at sasabihin paano ba natin ayusin ito at paano ba natin gagawin para hindi na maulit itong nangyari sa nakaraan.
Thank you, Senator Marcos. Mr. Ang, any follow-up questions?
Yes, the question is what specific policies you will adopt. You know, and Senator Marcos, you mentioned in the interview you had with DZRH and the Manila Times earlier that you wanted to use diplomacy over military solutions. I mean, are you changing that policy now?
No.
And in that same interview, Calyodi was saying that he wanted to make the West Philippine Sea a zone of peace. And now he's talking about possibly escalating the situation in that area. It's undeniably that we have to deal with China. The question is, as president, how will you do it?
No, the reason I spoke about putting a military presence there is so that the government, the Republic of the Philippines, has a presence there to show to China that we are defending what we consider our territorial waters. And that is not for them to go there to fire upon the Chinese vessels, but merely to make their presence felt so that the Chinese know we are aware of what they are doing, we do not agree with what they are doing, and we carry on with our diplomatic back channel, side channel, whatever way we can do to fix the problem and make us have a system so that we no longer have this problem again.
Senator Marcos.
Yes, and furthermore, I think, as I said, that this is not something that that we should consider as isolated from the general problem or the general discussions that we are having with the People's Republic. It should be the first part, in my view, because what we are, as Filipinos, we are most concerned at this moment, the immediate concern, na makabalik ang mga mangingisda dun sa kanilang palisdaan. Yun ang unahin natin. Ngayon, pag nakahanap tayo ng kasunduan sa People's Republic of China, ay siguro baka nasimulaan na natin ang pag-uusap tungkol sa West Philippine Sea. Dahil kung nasabi natin, amin yan, at tumanggap sila, umpisa na yan. Diyan tayo magsisimula at dahan-dahanin natin itong problema na meron tayo sa China.
We have a follow-up question from Professor Clarita Carlos.
Yes, there is no doubt that what is being fought over here is fish, isda. No? And so there is also no doubt that the food security of China cannot be at the expense of the food insecurity of the rest of us. Now let's move away from the pseudo-militaristic perspectives that some of you have noted earlier. And how about thinking about a regional fishing agreement, which is along the lines that Mr. Abella talked about a while back? The reason why I talked about that is, well, there's a personal reason, because I'm writing a book on regional fishing agreement. And since any one of you will become the President of the Republic of the Philippines, I was wondering if it is worth writing that book on a regional fishing agreement.
Why not?
Who wants to take on that question and statement
if
first?
I may,
Senator Marcos.
I beg to differ that this is about fish. It is not about fish, in my view. It is about territorial waters, and that when we have these 200 Chinese boats coming and blocking our fishermen, it is to assert their claim that this is part of their territorial water. And that is why you cannot separate the problems that we're having with the fishermen from the larger problem that we are having in our conflicting claims with China, and for that matter, for other countries in Asia. And that's why we have to look at it as maybe an opening. I always mention this, that we have to try every single way that we can. And I remind everyone that China and the United States came together because of ping pong. And who would have thought that that's where it would start? Who knows where our coming together will start?
But isn't that related, Mr. Marcos, to my earlier question about the Quad? You know, if you have a whole array of, militia there, wanting to take over the whole of the contested South China Sea, shouldn't you lean on the Quad as a collective security arrangement?
No, because that is a military solution, and that proposes a military solution. And I do not think we want a military solution, because we simply do not want a war. I do not think China wants a war. I do not think the United States wants a war. The Philippines certainly does not want a war.
Well, but Mr. Gonzales just said that China only recognizes naked power. So what are we talking about?
I don't think that is the method for us to come to an agreement with the People's Republic of China. There are three ways to gain territory. One is upon agreement with arbitration by an international body, agreement of two or more parties. Number two is war. And number three is bilateral agreement. We're left only, I think, with bilateral agreement, and that's what we should pursue.
Thank you.
And now we have an additional question from our panelist, SMNI News Senior Correspondent and Anchor MJ Mondejar. MJ, your question, please.
Thank you, Attorney Karen. Medyo mainit yung talakayan, no, sa issue ng China and West Philippine Sea. Now let's get back to the basics. Gentlemen, if you become the next President of the Republic, how do you plan to feed the 110 million Filipinos and the next generation if the prices of staple foods continue to increase? Specific po sana ang paglalatag po ng mga plano. Maraming salamat.
We have Senator Marcos answering the same question.
Ganun talaga, kailangan natin ayusin ang sektor natin ng agrikultura. At nakita kaagad ito nung pagdating ng pandemya na hindi tayo makapag-supply ng pagkain para sa ating mga kababayan dahil umaasa na lang tayo sa importation. Umaasa tayo sa importation dahil hindi na pinaganda ang agricultural sector. Kaya't sang-ayon ako sa sinabi ni Calyodin na dapat ibisahan natin sa R&D. Kailangan yung mga, lalo na may climate change ngayon, yung mga bagong varieties ng palay, ng kahit na lahat ng tanim ay pag-aralan natin para mas magandang magiging ani. Tapos lahat ng ayuda, lahat ng fertilizer, lahat ng pesticide, dapat makabili tayo ng mura. Tapos may pautang. Kaya siyempre kasama dyan yung patubig. Hanggang sa post-harvest facilities, hanggang sa processing, dadagdagan ko lang hanggang sa pag-retail. Dahil kung ang gobyerno ang humahawak sa buong production sa buong linya ng produksyon hanggat sa pagbenta sa retail, ay ang gobyerno ay hindi dapat kumita. Kaya maipagbibili nila ng mas mura. Dito ay naranasan na natin ito. Nung nagkaroon tayo ng Masagana 99 dun sa production, meron tayong ERI at saka PhilRice dun sa R&D, meron tayong FTI dun sa NFA, ng price stabilization, hanggang sa Kadiwa Store. Yun siguro ang modelo na pwede natin gayahin at ulitin.
Thank you, Senator Marcos. Okay,
I can take
Mr.
it.
Ang.
Yeah, well, just want to ask.
Misinformed.
Yeah.
Okay, it was
Well,
Mr. Ang.
I just want to ask about comparative advantage when we're talking about rice, because it's a basic economic precept that says you shouldn't make things that others can make cheaply. And many people have said that the Philippines lacks a comparative advantage in rice. So should we insist? I think this is related to the question of MJ with regard to food security policy. Should we insist on continuing planting a crop that we clearly don't have a comparative advantage?
Yes, I think we do. Simply because it is of strategic value to a state to have a good supply of food. So that, again, like any crisis that comes, magkagera man, magkaalitan man tayo sa Thailand at saka sa Vietnam, sapat ang ating supply ng simulaan natin sa palay. Ngunit kailangan din yung lahat ng isda, lahat din ng nag-aalaga ng hayop, ay kailangan yon lahat ay patulungan natin para kahit ano pang mangyari. Kagaya ng pandemya, nakita natin kaagad, napaabot na nga tayo sa sitwasyon na mahirap paniwalaan na ang Pilipinas ay nag-i-import ng galunggong. At dapat naman siguro hindi tayo nasa ganung sitwasyon. Pagka nagka-problema ulit, mahirap na naman tayo. Kaya't kailangan natin tulungan. At kahit na sinasabi namin mas mura, bili na tayo ng bili, may strategic na problema yan. Dahil pagka nagkagulo, wala tayong supply.
Thank you, Senator Marcos. And now